Raina Wells didn't mean to crash the job orientation, but in her defense, the building directory was confusing, and the security guard told her to take the elevator to the 12th floor. She adjusted the strap of her oversized tote bag, scanning the sleek glass conference room packed with sharply dressed people. Everyone looked like they'd walked out of a fashion catalog, and Raina, in her faded jeans and scuffed sneakers, suddenly felt like she'd wandered onto the wrong movie set. She clutched the resume she'd printed for a completely different interview and unpaid internship at a nonprofit on the 4th floor. "Welcome," a deep voice called from the front of the room. "I'm Yarden Blake, founder of Blake Enterprises. I'll be personally leading today's orientation." Raina froze. Blake Enterprises, wasn't that a tech company? Oh God, she was in the wrong room. And the man who had just spoken, the one in the tailored navy suit with the effortlessly confident posture, wasn't just any executive. That was the Yarden Blake, millionaire tech genius. She'd seen his face on magazine covers in grocery store checkout lines. She started to back toward the door, hoping to slip out unnoticed. "You," he said, pointing directly at her. Her stomach dropped. "Me?" Yarden's brows lifted, amused. "Yes, you. What's your name?" Every head in the room turned toward her. Raina's cheeks burned. Raina Wells," he nodded. "Have a seat, Raina." Then he turned back to the group. "Today's session is about more than resumes and experience. I'm looking for people who think differently, who stand out." Raina sat, her heart thudding loudly in her chest. She didn't know why she hadn't bolted. Maybe it was the way he'd looked at her, not like she didn't belong, but like he was curious. For the next hour, she sat through the most intimidating, fascinating session of her life. Yarden spoke with passion, charisma, and a strange kind of warmth that made even his sharpest critiques feel like encouragement. He challenged the room with questions, and when he asked why someone would want to work at Blake Enterprises, everyone gave polished answers, except Raina. He looked at her again. "Raina, what about you?" She blinked. "Honestly, I'm not even supposed to be here." The room erupted in quiet laughter, but Yarden smiled. "Keep going. I was looking for a nonprofit internship. I'm broke, my degree's useless, and I'm tired of pretending I have it all figured out. But I love solving problems, and I'm really good under pressure. That's all I've got." The room went silent. Yarden's lips twitched. "That's the most honest thing I've heard all day." After the session, Raina tried to leave quietly, but a hand touched her arm at the elevator. "Wait," Yarden said. "You didn't belong in that room, did you?" She laughed nervously. "Not even a little." He studied her. "And yet you stayed. You spoke up. That says something." "What does it say?" "That I'd be a fool not to talk to you again." He slipped a card into her hand. "Come back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Bring that problem-solving brain of yours." Raina stared at him. "Why?" "Because I don't believe in accidents," Yarden said, stepping into the elevator. "And I think you just crashed into something very right." The next morning, Raina showed up at the front desk of Blake Enterprises again, this time in a borrowed blazer and her only pair of heels that didn't squeak. She was greeted by a receptionist who led her straight to the top floor Yarden Blake's office. It was all glass, chrome, and skyline. Yarden stood at the window, phone pressed to his ear. When he spotted her, he ended the call and smiled. "You came. I figured I owed it to myself to see what all this was." He motioned to the seat across from his desk. "This isn't an interview, I just wanted to talk." "About what, you?" He leaned forward. "You're different. You say what you think. You don't pretend." "I like that. I'm not sure that's a business skill. It's rare and valuable. You interested in learning? Learning what? How to build something that matters." That afternoon, he had her shadow a project manager. By the end of the week, she was helping troubleshoot a product launch issue. And by the end of the month, she had a desk with her name on it, a paycheck bigger than she'd ever imagined, and a boss she couldn't stop thinking about. Yarden Blake was magnetic. Not just because he was rich, though Raina hadn't missed the way he got picked up in a sleek black car every night, or how he once gave an assistant a Rolex for his birthday, but because he saw people. He listened, and when he looked at her, it wasn't in the way men usually did. It was like he saw something in her she hadn't even found in herself yet. One night, after a long meeting, Raina stayed behind to finish notes. Yarden walked in, loosened his tie, and sat across from her. "You're still here, just wrapping up." He looked at her for a long beat. Dinner, she blinked. Like, now, I have a reservation, come with me, she hesitated. Is this a work dinner? He stood, holding out his hand. Does it have to be? They ended up in a private rooftop restaurant overlooking the city, where the waiter addressed Yarden like royalty and the wine list didn't have prices. Raina felt completely out of place until Yarden leaned in. I know this is fast, he said quietly. But I haven't stopped thinking about you since the day you walked into that room. I wasn't supposed to be there. I know, and I'm glad you were, she swallowed. Yarden. I don't mix business and personal, never have. But I'd regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't tell you this. I want to know you, really know you. Raina's heart pounded. I'm scared. He reached for her hand. So am I, but I think this could be something real. And in that moment, under the stars and the city lights, something shifted. She'd walked into the wrong room, but maybe she'd found the right man. Yarden didn't touch his wine until Raina had finished her story about the part-time jobs, the night classes, and the sister she helped raise while their mother worked double shifts. She hadn't meant to say so much, but something about the way he listened made it feel safe. Not like he was evaluating her, but like he actually wanted to understand. When she finally paused, his voice was low. I hope you know what that says about you. She narrowed her eyes. What? You weren't handed anything. You built yourself. That kind of grit, it's not something I come across often. She leaned back in her chair. Most people hear that and assume I'm a charity case. I don't do charity, he said. I do investments. And you, Raina Wells, are someone I'd bet everything on. Her fork stalled halfway to her mouth. He didn't take it back. By the time dessert came, the air between them had shifted. It wasn't flirtation, it was something deeper. Unspoken, but pressing. When the valet pulled up with his car, a sleek, silver Aston Martin, he opened the door for her like it was second nature. She hesitated, then slid in. Not because she wanted to be impressed, but because she couldn't bring herself to walk away just yet. They drove in silence through the city, lights flickering across the windshield, until he pulled up outside a tall building with mirrored windows. Raina turned her head. This your place? He nodded once. Let me show you something. She followed him into a marble lobby, past a man in a navy uniform who greeted Yarden by name, and into a private elevator that required a fingerprint. They rose fast. When the doors opened, they stepped into a penthouse that looked like it belonged on the cover of an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows, clean lines, and a view that made her breath catch. But he didn't give her time to gawk. He walked straight to the far wall and pressed a button. A panel slid open, revealing a sprawling whiteboard filled with sketches, notes, and equations. This is what I'm working on, he said. It's not public yet. She stepped closer, scanning the messy handwriting. What is it? An AI model for emergency response, faster than dispatch, smarter than current tech. It'll save lives if we get it right. Raina turned, stunned. Why are you showing me this? Because I want your eyes on it. He looked at her steadily. You think differently. I need that. She folded her arms, processing. You don't even know if I'm qualified. I'll train you. You've already proven you're capable. I just need to know if you're in. She stared at him, heart pounding. This feels big. It is, and personal. He stepped a little closer. That's why I chose you. The air between them tightened. She pulled back. I should go. He didn't stop her, just nodded like he understood. The next morning, she found an envelope on her desk at work. Inside was a badge with her name and a new title, Strategic Development Analyst. There was also a handwritten note. You said you were tired of pretending. Here's a chance to be exactly who you are. Why the work was intense. Long hours, high stakes. But for the first time, Raina didn't feel like she was treading water. She was solving real problems, pitching real ideas. And Yarden, he kept his distance, professionally. But she felt his presence everywhere, in the way her team suddenly had access to better resources, in the way her ideas were prioritized in meetings, and in the occasional texts that weren't about work at all. One evening, her phone buzzed as she left the office. How do you feel about jazz? She stared at the message, then typed back, I'm not sure I do. 15 minutes later, a car pulled up beside her with a driver who said, Mr. Blake asked me to bring you. The venue was tucked away in a quiet alley, velvet curtains, low lighting, and a saxophone that made the air hum. Yarden was waiting inside, already seated, 2 glasses of whiskey on the table. She slid into the booth. Still not sure how I feel about jazz, she said. He leaned in. It's not about the music, it's about the space it creates. No obligations, just room to feel. She looked away. I'm not used to things like this. I know, he said, but you said yes anyway, that means something. She hesitated, then picked up her drink. So what are we doing here, really? His answer was quiet. I'm trying to figure out how not to mess this up. Mess what up? The chance to know you without turning it into something transactional. She met his gaze. Then stop acting like you're the one with all the power. That made him pause. Is that how it feels? Sometimes, he nodded slowly. Then I'll fix that. She stared at him, unsure what to say. But when he reached across the table, not to touch her, just to let his palm rest there in open invitation, she didn't hesitate. Her hand landed in his, warm and trembling. For the first time, it didn't feel like she had to be anything but herself. But 2 days later, everything changed. She walked into the office early and found 2 people waiting at her desk. One was the CFO. The other was a woman with sharp eyes and a clipboard. Miss Wells, the woman said, we need to speak with you about your relationship with Mr. Blake. Raina's stomach dropped. What relationship? The woman raised an eyebrow. We've received reports of preferential treatment, promotions, assignments, personal messages logged on company servers. Raina looked between them, heat rising in her ears. This is a misunderstanding. I hope so, the CFO said. But until we finish our review, we'll need you to work remotely. She packed up her things in silence, heart pounding. As she stepped into the hallway, she spotted Yarden at the end of the corridor speaking with legal. His expression was unreadable. She waited for him to look up. He didn't. And just like that, the world she'd just begun to believe in started to slip away. Raina didn't cry until she was off the elevator, out of the building, and halfway down the block. Even then, it wasn't the kind of crying people noticed, just a quiet stream down her cheeks, as if her body had decided it was the only way to keep walking. She didn't go home. She couldn't sit in her apartment with nothing but silence and her own spiraling thoughts. Instead, she found herself in the back corner of a library, surrounded by old architecture books and rows of dusty shelves. It was the only place she could breathe. She didn't hear from Yarden that day, or the next, not a call, not a message through anyone else. Nothing. The silence said more than words could. By the end of the week, she'd thrown herself into freelance work she hadn't touched in years. It was dull, but it paid. Barely. She was surviving, but every time she opened her laptop, her eyes found the corner of the screen where the Blake Enterprises logo used to sit. She deleted it. 3 days later, she got a knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find a woman in a black trench coat holding a cream envelope with a heavy wax seal. Miss Wells, yes, this is for you. I was asked to place it in your hands directly. She took the envelope and the woman turned without another word, disappearing down the hallway. Inside was an invitation, not to a meeting, not to a hearing, to a gala hosted by the Blake Foundation. Raina blinked. At the bottom, in bold serif letters, it read, "Formal attire required. No press. No guests." She stared at it for a long time before tossing it on the table. Then, after pacing the apartment 3 times, she picked it up again and read it twice more. She didn't make a decision until the night of. The dress she wore wasn't new. It was a navy gown she'd borrowed from a friend back in college for a scholarship dinner. She hadn't returned it. It still fit, barely. She curled her hair, left her makeup minimal, and took a cab she couldn't really afford. The event was held at the Conrad Hotel in the Grand Ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung above a marble floor, and the guests were already mingling, glittering in couture and sipping champagne like it was water. Every step she took made her feel smaller, until she saw him. Yarden stood near the far wall, surrounded by board members and donors. He was in a black tuxedo, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass he hadn't raised to his lips. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes, they found her instantly. He excused himself without a word to the group and crossed the room with purpose. "You came," he said. "I wasn't going to. What changed your mind? I got tired of wondering why you didn't fight for me." He didn't look away. "That wasn't my decision. You let them pull me into an investigation like I was some mistake you needed to clean up. I told them not to touch you." Her breath caught. I told them they'd have to go through me if they tried, but it wasn't just about me anymore, Raina. There were board votes, partnerships, people who wanted to see me fall. If I'd interfered directly, it would have made everything worse for both of us. So you stayed silent instead. I stayed away so I could fix it the right way. She folded her arms. And this, a gala, I needed you here. For what exactly? He stepped closer. His voice dropped low. For this. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a document. She barely had time to register the Blake Enterprises logo before he held it out. Your reinstatement with a new title and stock options. Her heart thudded. Why? Because I cleared everything. The board knows the truth. There was no misconduct, no favoritism. You were just better than the people who didn't want you there. And you think a job fixes this? No, he said. But it gives you back what was taken, the rest. That's why I asked you here. She stared at him, waiting. He didn't blink. I've spent every night thinking about how I handled it, and I was wrong to think I could protect you by disappearing. I should have stood beside you, not behind you, not above you, with you. Her throat tightened. I don't care about rules anymore, he continued. Not when they cost me the one person who made any of this matter. She stepped back. You're saying all the right things. Because I've had time to figure out what I actually feel. And what's that? I'm in love with you. The words hit harder than she expected. I didn't plan it, he said. But I know it, and if you'll let me, I'll prove it. She didn't speak, not right away. Instead, she looked around the chandeliers, the polished marble, the crowd now watching them from a polite distance. Then she looked at him. Prove it how? He held out his hand. Come with me. She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. He led her out of the ballroom, through a private corridor and into a rooftop garden she hadn't known existed. The city stretched out around them, glittering and alive. What is this place? She asked. I built it last year. Needed somewhere quiet to think. And you brought me here because I never want to think without you again. She turned slowly to face him. I'm not a fantasy, Yarden. I'm not someone you can just sweep into your world and expect to stay there because it's shiny. I know, he said. You're the reality I've been missing. She studied him, her voice quieter now. And if something like that happens again, if people talk, let them, he said. I'm done pretending you're just another employee. You're not. You never were. Her hand found his chest, resting over his heart. You hurt me, I know. I don't forget things like that. Then I'll give you new things to remember. His hand curled around hers, steady and sure, and for the first time she didn't feel like she'd crashed into something she didn't deserve. She felt like she'd arrived exactly where she was meant to be. The first thing Raina noticed when she stepped into Yarden's home again, this time by invitation, not accident, was the change in energy. The walls were the same, the view just as sweeping, but something had shifted. It wasn't pristine anymore. There was a folded jacket on the back of a couch, a ceramic mug half full on a side table, and an open notebook on the counter with handwriting that wasn't his. You've been living here, she said, setting her bag down. Trying to, he replied, walking over from the kitchen. I started writing things down, things I never made time for before. She picked up the notebook and flipped through a few pages. It wasn't code or strategy, it was thoughts, personal ones, some dated, some crossed out and rewritten. You're really doing it, she said quietly, letting people see the version of you that isn't polished. I thought I had to be that version to succeed, he said. Turns out all it did was keep people out. She turned toward him. Including me, especially you. They sat together on the edge of the low couch, the sun dipping behind the skyline, painting the floor in gold. Do you remember when I told you I didn't believe in accidents? He asked. You said I'd crashed into something right, she nodded. I remember. I didn't realize how right until you left, she looked at him. I wasn't going to wait around forever. I wouldn't have wanted you to. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The weight of everything they'd been through hung between them, unspoken, but understood. Then he reached into the side table drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Raina's breath caught, but he didn't open it right away. This isn't about fixing what happened, he said. It's about building something new, together, no secrets, no power imbalance. Just two people choosing to be all in. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Are you asking? I'm hoping, he said, finally opening the box. Inside wasn't a ring, it was a key. She looked up at him, confused but intrigued. That's to the place I bought this morning, he said. It's not a penthouse. No doorman, no elevator that needs a fingerprint, just a brownstone in the West Village with a crooked staircase and a tiny courtyard with plants I already know I'll forget to water. She stared, stunned. I want to build a life with you that doesn't start on a rooftop or end with a gala, Yarden said. Just mornings with coffee and arguing over takeout and maybe, someday, something more. He wasn't dressed in a tuxedo now, no suit. Just jeans and a worn sweater, sleeves pushed up, hair a little messy from the wind. He looked more like a man than an empire. She took the key, held it in her palm. You're serious, I've never been more. She stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the city. For so long, she'd wondered if what they had was only possible because of the world he lived in. The wealth, the power, the access, but this was something different. You said you wanted to prove that you were done pretending, she said, turning to face him. I did. Then come with me, his brow lifted. Where? To see my world. They didn't take the Aston Martin. They took the subway. She watched him as they rode standing, one hand on the metal bar, the other in his coat pocket. He didn't flinch when someone bumped into him. Didn't complain when the car jerked too hard. He just looked at her, eyes steady. They got off near her favorite diner, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and laminated menus that hadn't been updated in years. She ordered grilled cheese and tomato soup. He asked for the same. When the waitress left, he leaned in. You used to come here a lot, every weekend in college. It was the one place I felt like I could think without someone needing something from me. He nodded. Then I'm honored to be here, she smiled. It's not glamorous. I'm not here for glamour. They sat for hours, talking about everything they hadn't before school, family, things they wanted to try but never had the time or courage to. The words came easier now, flowing without fear. By the time they stepped back into the cold night air, her hands were deep in her coat pockets and his shoulder brushed hers with every step. Outside her apartment door, she paused. I want to take this slow, she said. I'll match your pace. I need to know this isn't just some grand gesture. Then let me show you every day that it's not. She stepped forward, closed the space between them, and kissed him, not like the end of a story but the beginning of something real, something earned weeks past. Raina started her new role not in the same office, but in a new division Yarden had set up to give overlooked voices a place to lead. She wasn't the only one brought in under that philosophy. Her team was diverse, opinionated, and sharp. They challenged her. She loved every second of it. Yarden stayed out of her office. Not because he was avoiding her, but because they'd both agreed what they had didn't need to be broadcast. It just needed to be respected. When they were together, it wasn't about work. It was late night walks through the park, cooking badly in her apartment, reading side by side in the brownstone he'd filled with mismatched furniture and sunlight. One morning, as they drank coffee on the front steps, she turned to him. Do you ever miss the version of your life where everything was polished? He thought for a moment. No, not if it meant missing this. She leaned into him, her head on his shoulder. You know, she whispered, if someone had told me I'd crash a job orientation and end up here. They'd have been right, he said, smiling. She laughed softly. And for the first time in her life, the future didn't look uncertain. It looked exactly like this. Raina pressed her palms into the balcony railing, the cool stone grounding her as the early morning sun crept over the city skyline. Below, streets slowly stirred to life: dog walkers, delivery bikes, the first wave of cabs. The brownstone behind her was quiet, still wrapped in the hush of dawn. Inside, she heard the creak of floorboards, the unmistakable, unhurried step of someone who didn't need to rush anymore. Yarden appeared beside her, barefoot, coffee mug in hand, tousled from sleep. She didn't look at him. You're up early. He took a sip. You're up earlier. I had a dream, she said. I was back in that elevator the first day I ended up at your office. Only this time, the doors never opened. He leaned on the railing next to her. What do you think it meant? I think. Part of me still doesn't believe this is real, this life. He was quiet for a moment, then he set his cup down and turned to face her fully. I bought that building, she blinked. What? The one where we met. I finalized the deal yesterday, she frowned. Why? I told myself it was a smart investment. It's not. The board hates it, but I couldn't stand the idea of someone else changing that space. She raised an eyebrow. You bought it for sentimental reasons. I bought it because every time I step into that elevator, I remember what it felt like to see you standing there, out of place, and yet somehow exactly where you were supposed to be." She gave him a long look, lips twitching. "You're turning into a romantic. I'm evolving." They stayed that way for a while, leaning into the quiet, until she turned and walked back inside. He followed, setting his mug on the kitchen counter as she reached into a drawer and pulled out a manila folder. "I've been working on something," she said. He watched her slide the folder across the counter. "What is it?" "A proposal, not for a product, for an expansion." He opened it, eyes scanning the pages. "You want to take the Innovation Hub model to public schools?" She nodded. "Not every kid's going to walk into the wrong room and get a life-changing opportunity. Some of them need the room to come to them." He closed the folder slowly. "You want to do this under Blake Enterprises?" "No, I want to do it under Wells Initiative, as a partner." He leaned back, studying her. "I don't want to be absorbed into your brand," she said. "And I don't want this to be a passion project that fades after one fiscal quarter. I want autonomy, real support, and 3 years of guaranteed funding." He didn't hesitate. "Done." She blinked. "You haven't even read the budget projections." "I've already invested in riskier things," he said, stepping around the counter, "and none of them had your conviction." She met his gaze, heart thudding in a way that had nothing to do with business. "This matters to me." "Then it matters to me." A week later, they stood side by side at a press conference in a community center gym, surrounded by a sea of folding chairs and curious eyes. Raina wore a navy dress with pockets and a pin bearing the Wells Initiative logo. Yarden stood slightly behind her, arms crossed, letting her take the mic first. She spoke clearly, confidently, laying out the plan: mobile learning labs, mentorship programs, a tech curriculum designed by educators, not consultants. When she finished, she didn't look to Yarden for approval. She didn't need to. He only stepped forward once the applause died down. "I won't take credit for this," he said. "This isn't my vision, it's hers. I'm just here to make sure it has everything it needs to succeed." Afterward, as they walked through the halls of the center, a small boy tugged on Raina's sleeve. She crouched down as he asked her if she was the lady who was going to bring robots to their school. She grinned. "Not robots. But maybe someday." He offered her a sticker from his backpack, a crumpled star with glitter on the edges. She took it like it was a medal of honor. When they stepped outside, Yarden looked at her sideways. "You're not going back to tech full-time, are you?" She shook her head. "This is where I'm supposed to be," he nodded. "Then I'll build around you." That night, they hosted their first dinner in the brownstone. Nothing formal, just close friends, former colleagues, and a few of the new program directors. Raina cooked. Yarden set the table. They argued briefly over fork placement and laughed when the power flickered halfway through the meal. After everyone left, Raina stood in the kitchen, stacking plates. Yarden came up behind her, arms wrapping around her waist. "You know," he said into her shoulder, "I used to think I'd end up alone. Not because I didn't want love, but because I didn't think I'd ever find someone who could see through all the noise." She leaned back into him. "It's not about seeing through the noise. It's about being willing to stand in it with you." He turned her around, hands framing her face. "I want to marry you," her breath caught. "I know it's fast," he said, "but everything with us has been fast. That doesn't make it less real." She blinked. "You don't have a ring." "I don't need one to ask." She cupped his jaw. "Ask then." He didn't lower himself to one knee. He didn't need to. "Raina Wells, will you marry me? Build this life with me, all the chaos and the quiet, the wrong rooms and the right turns?" She didn't hesitate. Yes. The wedding was held in the garden behind the brownstone 6 months later. There were string lights, mismatched chairs, and vows that made even the most hardened tech executives tear up. Her sister walked her down the aisle. Yarden's mother flew in from abroad for the first time in years, crying quietly through the entire ceremony. They danced barefoot in the grass. No press, no headlines, just them. The night ended with them curled up on the same balcony where she'd once questioned whether any of this could be real. Now there was no more doubt. They built their life one day at a time. Early mornings with coffee and quiet plans. Evenings filled with laughter, messy kitchens, and occasional debates about who forgot to buy milk. And every time they passed the building where it all began, Raina would nudge him and say, "Best wrong elevator ride I ever took." He'd always reply, "Best crash of my life," and they meant it. Every word, every time.